Welcome to Trial Lawyer Prep. What if you could hang out with trial lawyers and jury consultants? Ask them about connecting with clients and juries more effectively. Then take strategies, tactics, and insights to increase your success. Each week, Elizabeth Lyric takes an in-depth look at how to regain touch with the everyday world, understand the emotional burden of your clients and juries, and use focus groups in this process. Elizabeth is an experienced trial lawyer, consultant, and founder of Lyric Law Firm in Austin, Texas. Her goal is to help you connect with juries and clients in order to improve your abilities in the courtroom. Now, here's Elizabeth.
Hello, and welcome back to the Trial Lawyer Podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth Lyric, and today we have a treat. We have a guest joining us. Kiele Linroth Pace is joining us. She and I missed each other at a happy hour, but I got her information and I had to have her come speak at the Capital Area Trial Lawyers Association, which she did, and I'm so grateful she did. And after that, I've been following her on LinkedIn and I just love all her posts. And recently she had a little post that caught my eye. And I thought, ooh, she needs to come on the podcast and tell all us trial lawyers about what she does. So thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So this post about being special counsel. So first of all, they know a little bit about you because we did a little bit of a bio background, but what does that mean? I'm totally intrigued. Tell us a little bit.
Right. It's a new offering for me, and it's joining my two worlds, if you will, because of course I had a 20 plus year career as a litigator. Specifically, I did domestic violence defense, which is criminal law. And of course, over the course of my business development journey, I also grew my solo practice into a boutique law firm. So in addition to the criminal law background, and especially a deep dive on domestic violence defense, there was law firm administration, building, running, directing the team, etc., that I did in that world. And up until recently, I thought that I was leaving that behind to transition, to shift gears into coaching, which originally started within my firm. And then I ultimately decided that I actually wanted it to shift to a different audience. My ideal clients these days are lawyers rather than people who've been arrested for domestic assault. And what's happened is I made this, it was a leap of faith to just shut down my law firm at one point. I had been trying to run it while launching my coaching practice, and it wasn't really working very well for me. I know some people are successful in doing that, but I got to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to have to just give this my all. And so I just made that decision and started winding down my law firm. And that has been a long process that's taken close to 2 years now, definitely over 18 months, somewhere in there. And as I've wound down the law firm, of course, that also has meant that my income is reducing because I'm very much in startup mode with my coaching practice. And even though that's going well, now I'm at a point where I have more time because my caseload has shrunk. I've got one case left. I'm so excited. And so,
congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting. And in the meantime, I developed myself as a speaker. I've been doing, in fact, that's how you and I met, of course. That's been great fun. But I do need to supplement my income while I keep going. And so in thinking about, how do I want to do that? Something that's aligned, something that's, for me, given my talents and strengths and whatnot, easy, lucrative, and fun, and still allows me plenty of time to work on my coaching practice, to both the marketing of it, the fulfillment for my existing clients and new clients and whatnot. So what came to mind, it was really an epiphany, is thinking back to where I was in 2015 when I started my business development journey. It was so hard to make the time that I needed to make to do all the things, right? So I knew I needed to do things like hire and learn to hire, much less the actual implementation of it. And then there were all the things I was already doing that were necessary to provide the quality of representation that I wanted to for my clients. And so just finding the time to actually implement all of this new stuff I was learning, to continue doing the things before I was able to, things of legal work, right? Before I was able to package it and deliver it to a qualified individual who I had hired or brought on, whether that's a staff member or a new vendor or whatever. And so that was where the light bulb went off, because it was like, how awesome would it have been at that time if I had had somebody like me who was available to come in and delegate things to, somebody I could trust to operate independently, someone who's got their eye on the ball, both with regard to the quality of representation, as well as like the healthy development of a law practice, and especially if it's moving into a small law firm. So that was it. And I'm so excited because I was like, oh my gosh, this is something I can do. This is something that would actually be a great help to some of my existing clients, future clients. And I'm happy to do this kind of work. And it really allows me to pick and choose. And I only have a small number of seats because I'm not available for a lot of time, and it's just me doing this work at this point. But if this goes well, this may actually be something that I train other people to come in and do and provide this type of assistance. But for now, it is just me. And I have folks I've been talking to who are excited, but I'm just now launching it. It's basically another startup.
Awesome. And what I heard you say, what I think will probably pique a lot of people who listen here, which is hiring, which is always a dreaded task. And I will, of course, speak for myself running a law firm than doing what I do now. There's always just so many pitfalls you can make. And so Tell us a little bit more about that part of it, as far as that role that you take on, or relieve some pressure in that area.
It's really going to depend on the specific needs of each individual that I'm working with as to how comfortable they are with different aspects. Some people are more advanced in having hired people, having an idea of what their process is, who they want to work with, and so forth. But some people are going to be like I was. And honestly, before I started down the business development journey and actually started doing business coaching, I was afraid of hiring. I had such a fear of hiring that I went for many years without hiring anybody. And when I finally realized I needed to, I actually wimped out and hired my husband. I brought him in to my practice, then husband, I should say. He was a software developer, but he had a lot of strengths when it came to law because of his family background. And so that was a good move in some ways and not so great in other ways, because I really didn't know what I was doing when it came to hiring. And even that, when you bring somebody in who's close to you, it's just as important that learn how to do this properly, how to be clear about what the job description is, what their role is, that sort of thing. And so what I'm talking about, if somebody wants me to help them with hiring, probably the first step, and it's going to, again, depend on where they are, how pressing it is for them, how overloaded and overwhelmed they are, because it might start with, whatever it is that you need help with, I take it off your plate first and do it myself so that I can get a good feel for what's involved. I might help you write some policies and procedures that are going to be helpful for somebody else, because ultimately you probably want, depending on what the nature of the work is, you probably want me to peel it off, get it packaged, and then delegate it to somebody else, help you bring somebody on board. Now that might be a direct hire employee, or it might be a vendor. For example, there are a lot of companies these days that provide virtual assistants, including in the legal sphere. There's some companies that focus on lawyers, and being able to actually delegate well to any of those providers, whether it's a staff member or a vendor, that's something I'm going to probably be better poised to do than most folks who haven't gone down this business development journey. So I can do that. And like really any part of that process that they need help with, I can help them.
Yeah. And I would say most lawyers and solos or small firms are ready to hire right now, and they're just not. And it's one of the biggest things that
last year.
is people are just, and again, I get it. We are the business and we work on it and in it, as they always say. And I always cringe when I hear sometimes listening on podcasts or other stuff where people say, wait to hire until, and I'm like, no, because I did that for so long too, and just waited and just hire ahead, look ahead at that kind of stuff and get ready for it. Yeah. So I love that. The delegating, I feel like that is such a skill. It's a skill we have to learn, especially as lawyers.
It is. And it can really be painful when you don't know and don't have a clue how to do it yet. And you do start hiring, because you're absolutely right. Sometimes you have to just get in there and do it and figure it out and be prepared to make mistakes and then correct and make adjustments and whatnot. But it can be challenging and problematic when you hire somebody and you make that commitment with the idea that I'm going to be able to afford to pay this person because they're going to take things off my plate, that I'll be able to do more lucrative things, bring in more money. That's true, but it can be tough to get from the point of where it's a payout to it's actually paying for itself if you don't know how to delegate properly, if you don't know, and it can cause other problems. And it certainly did for me in my business when I think about what I call team building round one, where there were some accountability issues. There were some things that I didn't really know how to do well. And so even though it seemed like we were doing well for a couple of years, ultimately there were some internal problems that I discovered after I had a couple of people leave. And that's when I'm going through and picking up the pieces and going, oh, wow, that person who just quit without notice, it's too bad I didn't know what I know now about what was going on when they were here, because I would have fired them.
Yeah. Or just known like they weren't ever going to be a good fit from the jump.
Yeah.
Cause I've definitely done that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we could definitely, I feel like, spend most of our time talking about that. And I only touch on that so much because I feel like I'm always hearing on listservs and from people like, hey, I need this associate, or I'm looking for this paralegal, or and it's, what systems do you have in place? Where are you looking for?
Yeah.
And I think as business owners can get so bogged down with that because we're working and then we're just like, oh, we need to have a system or policies or clearly written job descriptions.
Yes.
That it's, oh yeah. And that takes so much time. I'm glad to hear that is something that you are passionate about.
Yeah. I actually love systems and spreadsheets and all kinds of stuff that a lot of people hate.
Yeah. Sometimes it just feels this overwhelming burden of, wait a second, I just need to solve this problem. But now you're telling me to have these 6 other things in place before I can solve that problem. But there's a method to the madness. Let me ask you, if you want to step into this place and kind of help law firm owners, what are you seeing are some of the mistakes, again, as being a law firm owner or just watching other people or having people in your coaching program? What are the mistakes that you're seeing people make that are really directly impacting their ability to grow their business?
It's not one that's intuitive. The one that I see across the board, whether we're talking about a solo or a small law firm owner, or even on up to bigger enterprises, the biggest mistake that I see is the one that I made myself, and that is neglecting themselves and their personal development. And we talked about delegating. They also tend to resist delegating. It's a related issue, right? You're taking on too much. You are typically, most of the people that we're talking about, long past when they should have been looking at a way to take some of this stuff off their plate. Now they're at this max capacity. And the problem is that like entrepreneurialism, and let me back up, let's be clear. A lot of lawyers, I think, don't know this, but running a law firm, building a law firm is an entrepreneurial activity. It's business. It's not really law anymore. It's business. And the thing about entrepreneurialism is that, like, true success, at least the way that I see it and that I define it now, requires resilience. It requires creativity. And these are qualities that it's hard to develop. It's hard to maintain. It's hard to embody them if you're anxious, if you're overworked, if you're overwhelmed, if you're burned out. And I was no exception. Even after, and this is the sad part, even a couple of years into my business development journey, when I was working with some really great coaches and I was being taught all these wonderful lessons, technical lessons, really more about business, I was still neglecting my personal development. And so ultimately what happened is I got stuck and I couldn't see the problem. I couldn't see why I couldn't progress. I had gotten to a certain point. I had built a team. I had taken out commercial leases, all these things. My gross revenues were hugely increased over where I had started. And it wasn't that I wasn't taking it seriously. I was working hard to learn, to implement. And in hindsight, I can say I was working too hard. And again, that's that point at which I was neglecting myself, doing all these things, and they were great things, but I was never going to get past that particular point if I didn't stop and create some space for myself, take care of myself, right? Because the solutions, they actually require that your brain have the space, have the time, have the energy. And contrary to everything else I'd accomplished up to that point in my life, really, it was never going to be solved by just throwing myself at the problem, by working harder and harder. So that's why I say it's counterintuitive. And I think that's the biggest mistake that most people make.
Yeah. And hands down, one of the favorite things that I always hear is what got you here won't get you there. And it's exactly right. You get to a point where you can keep running up against the wall. This definitely has happened to me. And then at some point, like you said, somebody comes from completely out of left field and is like, oh, it's that. And you're like, oh,
Blind spot.
Wow. And I couldn't have spotted it. And that's why I love having a coach, having an outside perspective of somebody being able to come in and be like, hey, Elizabeth, it's this thing right here. Oh man. Okay.
Yeah.
So stop, go address this thing that's this limiting belief, this story you keep telling yourself, this thing that's sabotaging what's going on in your daily life. And you can't figure it out. Like you said, you're working harder at the problem and you're not getting anywhere.
Absolutely.
100% preaching the choir on that personal development. And I also appreciate you sharing, like, you were doing all the things business wise, right?
Yeah.
Doing all the things and it was successful. Like you said, there's always going to be some place that you get stopped.
Yeah.
And having somebody else look at it always is really helpful. And it sounds like that's like you want to bring in that outside perspective to help other law firms be able to see, oh, hey, here, you think this is the problem. No, here is the actual bottleneck. So let's help you figure this out.
Yeah. That's what I do as a coach and a consultant. That's part of what I do as a coach and consultant. And that's different work, really. The freelance services, the special counsel role is a little bit different because it's more about the implementation, right? So as a coach, when I'm working with somebody and I might help them come up with an idea, or I might just get them on the right path so that they can come up with the idea that they need. But it's up to them to implement it. I'm not going to actually do the work. They do the work. This is something I like to tell people, prospective clients, when we're talking about the possibility of working together. One of the things I want to make clear to them is one of the big differences between law and coaching is that in law, the lawyer has a lot of control over the end result. We can't make the facts, we can't make the law, and certainly our clients can do a lot to either help or hinder us in getting to the best possible result. But in coaching, it's actually the client who has to do the heavy lifting, right? The coach is a guide, merely a guide. The client is really the one that has to be responsible. The coach cannot do it for them. And so one of the differences here when it comes to special counsel, and this is a very, like I said, I have a limited amount of time and hours that I'm willing to put into this, but I can actually help them implement. And that's the difference, because that was the thing when I was working with coaches that I really wished that I had somebody who knew what's what, who could actually help me do that stuff, do the work. And that's the difference here.
Gotcha. And that makes so much sense. And I appreciate you clarifying that, because we want implementation. Even sometimes when we have a coach, it's like picking up that amazing book that everybody loves. Let's take Atomic Habits. That's an amazing book, but it does nothing for you if you're not going to actually implement what it says in there.
First, you have to actually study it, not just read it.
Yeah.
Right? You can read a book and then put it back on your shelf and go on with your merry life and think that was great, but it's not going to get you anywhere. You have to study it, and then you also have to do the exercises, whatever it is that they're recommending that you do. If you don't actually do that part, the difference between reading and studying, like I have a whole little lesson on that for clients.
It's such a huge deal. And I will say one of my favorite apps that I've gotten into is called Readwise. And I love a paper book, but I love Readwise because whatever you're reading on Kindle or wherever, you can highlight, it goes into Readwise. And then every day you do a little review and it's your little quotes. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So
that's nice.
It's so helpful, because just those little gentle reminders is what I try to have for myself. Again, to know, hey, I studied this, don't forget about it. But let's keep going here. Let me get us back on track there. Okay. So I know business owners, law firm, we all need just more time in our day. I always hear from all my folks I work with, I'm just so busy, or I don't have enough time. What are things that you suggest or that you teach that kind of give people back their time?
Okay. Specifically for lawyers, I have three, I guess my top three suggestions. Lawyers generally, but I would say especially litigators in the example that I'm going to give. The first one I would say is learn to set healthy boundaries. Now, I actually did a workshop on this topic last summer because it was requested so much by my local attorney mom group. And that's actually where my interest in coaching lawyers came from. This large group of women, we probably have about 1,500 members at this point, a very active Facebook group. And I had already done a Mindset Mastery 101 workshop for them just to help them understand this framework, the stuff that I do, that I practice these days, that I teach. And that went well. It was very well received. But I was asking them, like, okay, look, I have a couple ideas about what's next in terms of topics, but how about you help me help you by letting me know, what do you need to know about? What do you want to know? And this was the thing that this was my idea, and it was very well received. And along with that, they also said, and we're not going to get into this, but imposter syndrome, right? So healthy boundaries was the very next workshop that I did, because it was so much a problem for me in the earlier days of and also so much a problem for these attorneys that I was talking to and working with. So the UT Law CLE, they have an online catalog, and it's called Setting Boundaries with Clients and Colleagues. This is the workshop that I did. And just to be clear, My role as a faculty member with UT Law CLE is completely volunteer. So I don't get any money by recommending their workshops, but they do have some great content. And this is one of the ones I'd recommend. And one of the examples that I talk about in that workshop that is, to me, so clear, I think it's probably clear for any litigator about where boundaries can come into play, is in the early days for me, when I was in court all the time, the early days of my practice as a criminal defense attorney, I had no idea that I could and should set any boundaries when it came to scheduling. Specifically, when for criminal defense attorneys, they have court coordinators and judges throwing dates at them right and left in multiple courts all day long. I shouldn't say all day long, all morning. Mostly court is in the morning from like 9 a.m. to noon. But they might appear in multiple different courts and they get a reset, meaning they're in court today. And when they wrap up their business for the day on this particular case, the court coordinator or the judge throws a date at them. And quite often they just take that date and they write it down and it goes in their calendar and they're back whatever random date was just thrown at them. And then same thing to some extent with a contested hearing or trial. And they'll look at their calendar to make sure they don't have an absolute conflict, right? Oh, I'm going to be in another county that day with a hearing or whatever. I'm not going to be able to do that. But what I didn't realize, and so many attorneys don't realize, especially the younger they are, the less experienced they are, is I could actually set boundaries. You know what? I need time to do my out of court work during business hours. So I can't appear in court every single day of the week. That's just so disruptive. I can't get anything else done if that's what I'm doing. And so I learned to start doing things like, and there's some trial and error here. You might have to experiment, but like taking Mondays off, and not off from work, but off from court, where Mondays was, and what I learned for that to be is my business and personal development day, as well as things like business errands, personal errands. This was my default day of the week if I needed to schedule a doctor's appointment or something specific that I needed to do for my kids. And so that's, to this day, that's the day that I favor for that. Then Fridays, I learned I absolutely couldn't. This is where the trial and error comes in and your specific circumstances matter. I was in court 4, which is the domestic violence court in Travis County, a specialized court. And since by that point, by the point I was doing this, I probably had 85% of my cases were in that court. And so I couldn't take Fridays off because that's when they did protective orders. That's when the biggest docket was for the criminal cases. That's whatever. So Friday was definitely one of my court days, my court heavy days, if you will. And then the afternoons, Tuesday, and I still favor this scheduling probably because of this background, but grouping my calls. So setting boundaries with clients about when I'm available to get on the phone. Right? Obviously, they need to be able to talk to me. I need to be able to answer their questions. I need to be able to get back to them quickly. But that doesn't mean that I have to accept a call right now in this instant when I'm working on something else. So setting boundaries with clients where you say, no, I'm available outside of an emergency. I'm available for office hours, whether that's a meeting or it's a phone call or maybe it's a Zoom, a virtual meeting, Tuesday through Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. or whatever it is. I'm just throwing out what my times tend to be, but everybody's life is a little different. What days work best for you and whatnot. But the most important thing here is that number one is learning to set healthy boundaries. And there's a whole process for doing that. If you don't know how to do it already, that makes you the most effective. That's what this workshop is about. So when I was asked, please help us learn how to do this, I sat down and said, all right, so when I learned how to do this effectively, what were the steps? What was involved? Because this is actually a mindset challenge. It may not seem like it, it may seem very practical, but how to actually go about setting boundaries effectively is a mindset challenge. So that's number one. Should I just go on to number 2 or do you have questions? I know I just rattled off a whole
no
bunch
questions.
of stuff.
Yeah. I was just going to say one of the healthiest boundaries that I ever set in my business, and I still had to, is I take no cold calls.
Yes.
No cold calls.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. And this was actually like that first group that I belonged to that provided business coaching for lawyers. They taught me that. And it was a hard sell for me at first. And it is a hard sell for a lot of lawyers. Like and a lot of my ideal I call them hiring attorneys, right? So an attorney who's looking at hiring me to do freelance work, to come in as special counsel, that's a hiring attorney, as to distinguish them from a client who's hiring me to do them, like a non-lawyer who's hiring me to do legal work for them, which I'm not really available to do any more of that, or an attorney who maybe is hiring me as a coach. So an ideal hiring attorney for me is somebody who really cares about their clients and really cares about the quality of representation they're providing. And there's this mindset that goes along with that oftentimes, that you have to be available like now, and you have to be willing to drop everything to talk to the client in order to provide what the client needs, in order to provide the high quality of representation and care that's necessary. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. That's a limiting belief right there. And it's one that is really destructive, actually, because it ends up meaning that you don't have the time and energy. You get constantly interrupted, even when you need to be doing work for your clients, right? Like when you would be best served and your clients would be best served for you having 2 uninterrupted hours each day when you're at your optimal. For me, that's typically like 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. when I am like on point mentally. And that's why I typically won't take calls during that time. I won't schedule calls or meetings. And so that's something that and there are tools there. Have a good assistant or paralegal, right? Who can provide a lot of the information and the contact that the client needs, and then get back to them quickly. Yes, I agree. And another thing that I like to do is I'll return calls during a certain block, right? Somebody called, I might try to call them back during my times, during my office hours, but I'm not ever outside of an emergency going to take a call. Not typically, not, and it's not that I don't care. It's actually because I do care, because I'm trying to conserve my energy so that I can be on point and focused only on that client and that client's work when I need to be.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a virtual receptionist that I call my Iron Curtain because they don't let anybody get through unless it's a judge. Because all I did was civil law. So there's no emergencies in civil law. So
You didn't do family law, I take it.
No, absolutely not. No way.
Because it's funny because a lot of people, when they hear me say domestic violence defense, they later they'll think I said family law. Oh God, no, I will not touch family law with a 10-foot pole. That's, even though they're very comparable, family law is the closest you're going to get to DV and vice versa. But there are some dynamics in family law that I, even as a criminal defense attorney, was like, nope, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I bless those people who do family law because there's a big need for it, but it just was not.
There is totally. They are truly they're the angels and the people who love it, the people who do such a great job. It's completely necessary and it can help those people. But this is an important part of like special counsel. The folks who are doing family law, one thing that's important to understand, if you're interested in working with me, be aware that one of my policies is I am not signing on as attorney of record. And as a general rule, I'm not going to be the primary one interfacing with your clients. Yeah.
Yeah. So
my boundaries.
You're trying to help the business, not the work of the business.
The business owner. Yeah. And I might be available for things like, I'm really good at talking people off a ledge. And sometimes that's necessary in family law. That was sometimes necessary in criminal law as well. So it's one thing to come in as a pinch hitter to assist in certain ways. And sometimes a client can benefit from hearing it from a different voice. And I get that. But yeah, no, I'm not going to become the one for your clients.
Yeah. Special counsel does not mean that. So
Exactly. Exactly. Let's see. We had number 2, shall we?
Yeah. Keep going. Yeah. What other, and again, just to get suggestions to get some time back.
Exactly. So setting those healthy boundaries should get you some time that now you can turn your attention to number 2. And I'm saying these in the order that I actually mastered them in my own life. Setting boundaries is a great place to start to get you some of your time back. And then you can take some of the time that it's going to take a little bit more time at first, but I promise you it will get you back more time. And that's learning to delegate effectively. We talked about that a little earlier. So finding and delegating to qualified team members or vendors, and sometimes vendors can actually end up being team members for you, depending on how that's structured, like a virtual assistant. Sometimes you have a dedicated person, or not, they may not be dedicated. They may work on other people's accounts, but they work regularly for you on an ongoing basis. And actually, I would be another good example. As special counsel, if I do regular routine work for a client, even though I'm a vendor, I can actually become a team member. And in fact, in the case of somebody who wants to guarantee a certain number of hours, they can actually even put me on their website, and that can be helpful and beneficial. But here's the thing, not knowing how to do this well, right? So it's a great way to leverage your knowledge, your experience, but only if you learn to do it well. So I'm going to provide a tip here that there was a book that was recommended to me by, I think it was one of the coaches that I was working with at the time, that was a fantastic resource for me. And it's called The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson. This was huge for me. It's a pretty easy read. It's a fairly small book, but it was game-changing in terms of helping me delegate better to other people in a way that they actually took responsibility for the problem, and where I refused to take responsibility for the problem, right? The problem actually ended up being They called it a monkey. I loved this. So I'm giving them a monkey. They don't get to give back the monkey to me. I can talk to them about the monkey. I can make suggestions, and usually I'm going to ask questions, like helping guide them. That's my job. That becomes my job as the manager. So it's just a fantastic book. And it's been a long time since I read it and implemented it, but I remember that it made such a big difference and absolutely gave me a whole bunch of time back, because at that point I was having trouble where I had hired people who needed me so much that it's almost like I had created more work for myself initially. So before you even if you haven't hired anybody yet, before you even make your first hire, read this book. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. I definitely have read it. It's super short, and the way that it's written is very easy. It's a story plus it's super great. Same people who moved my cheese. Another very good
love
book.
that book too. Yeah.
Short and sweet. And he has a whole series. I know like the 1 Minute Manager, Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson have a whole series, but of 1 minute, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, great recommendation. Super easy to read and short, and you can reread it again and study it easily as well. So
yes, I honestly, so I'm back in startup mode. And when I start hiring my own team members again, I'm probably going to go back and read it. And actually, here's another tip. This is an aside. This is a bonus. Some of the best resources for business and personal development, put them on your shelf and come back to them. Like, you'll get more out of it if you read it again later. So if you start feeling like I'm struggling in this area again, go back to one of those foundational resources that helped you so much the first time around, because most likely, because you're in a different place, you'll get new things out of it. You'll be reminded of some things that maybe you forgot or you're kind of rusty on. So yeah, dust off those books, get them back out, and pay attention to your foundational resources. And honestly, Who Moved My Cheese? That's another one I'll probably go back to soon, right?
Yeah,
when things are in flux, it's a great time to go to that book.
At the beginning of the year, I always like to reread a couple of books. One of them is You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero.
Oh, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
She's
sometimes
fantastic.
you just need a good punch to go in some of those ones. I'm always like, okay, I got to go back and read that, or it's just that time to refresh and get jazzed up again.
Yeah, no, she's definitely that. I consider that her main book, her primary book. I would consider a foundational resource in my own studies and books that I recommend to clients. For sure. She's got several, and her money book, I forget if it's like You Are a Badass at Making Money.
Oh my gosh.
That one's fantastic for money mindset. Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome. I reread that one as well. And then she has the other one. I think she has a little one. And then I'm a huge fan. I get her calendars, so I have a calendar reminder every day. But yeah, her two ones, You Are a Badass and You Are a Badass at Making Money. She does a fantastic job.
Yeah. And I would recommend for lawyers in particular, definitely read her first book, but I would highly recommend the money book. And part of the reason I think is a lot of lawyers, I don't know, they don't like to talk about money. They don't necessarily understand that money, like, you need to get comfortable with money and you get comfortable talking about money and get to a place of having an abundance mindset. I think many of us don't. And we just have no clue what it means to have a good mindset around money.
Yeah. And I think in plaintiff's personal injury, it's tough because we walk in the courtroom and everybody in that juror, they already programmed in their mind we're just a bunch of greedy trial lawyers. And so talking about money can be tough if you're not comfortable, like they know it. It's that little gut
Exactly. Feeling. Yeah. You're going to be somewhat out of integrity if you're not comfortable talking about money. And that's going to definitely communicate itself to them in ways that you may not understand and are not going to serve you well.
Mm-hmm. One other thing about Jen Sincero really quickly, if you all pick up the book. So what I also love about her, You Are a Badass, is in the back, she has all of her resources, like all these extra books, like if you are curious. And so I think one of her book is one of the very first ones that I picked up. And then I loved it so much. I just went through her resources, and she's got a bunch of really great stuff in there too, if you just don't know. And I think a lot of people just don't really know where to get started sometimes. So
that's a great idea.
Last plug for her. Maybe she's listening.
No.
I doubt it. She's not a lawyer. Last suggestion.
I'm going to make one more. I'm going to make one more plug for her. One of the things I love about her writing is that it's so fresh and irreverent and even funny at times, even though she's dealing with a very serious subject matter. So it's easy to read. It really connected with me on a level, in a way that some of the resources that have been recommended to me before that were hard. Like some of the money mindset books in particular, I cannot remember the name of it right now. It doesn't matter. But it was just like, I had to force myself through those books Hers, no way. It was just so easy to read and it was so easy to go back to. I actually look forward to it when I'm planning to return. So yeah, I'll stop plugging her too. So let's say we were still on our list of suggestions. Number 3, for getting time back. Now, this one is probably counterintuitive for a lot of folks too, but choose work that lights you up. I know it's easier said than done, and oftentimes you may feel overwhelmed by the mere suggestion. If you're at a place with your law practice, with your work, with the business side of things, if it's so hard and it's like pushing a boulder uphill, that kind of thing, that may make it feel overwhelming. But if that's you and that's what's going on, then this tip is especially for you, because it doesn't have to be that way. Even within the same exact job, the same work, the same business, you can make changes, you can adjust things, you can delegate some of the things that are dragging you down like that energetically, and you can actually transform your job. In my case, it was over a period of 9 months that I was able to transform my job, where the work that I was doing, even though it very much resembled the work that I was doing before, was more aligned with things that lit me up. Now, for me, ultimately, it actually also meant shifting out of law, even though there were a lot of things that I loved about law, about litigation, and a lot of things that were very fulfilling and rewarding. What I ultimately realized is that coaching was really what lit me up. And that's why I made that decision to shift gears. And so here's the thing. It may be a lot and it can be a lot, but I promise it pays massive dividends, because the thing that you may not realize if you haven't made any of these shifts yet is that your work can actually energize you rather than draining you, rather than sucking the soul out of you, so to speak. And I know a lot of lawyers who are in that place where it really, there's some litigators who that is what lights them up, and that's fantastic. But there are many people doing litigation where that's really not what lights them up. And that's terrible, because it tends to suck them dry, right? So here's the thing. If you're doing work that actually lights you up, then it energizes you rather than draining you, which means you need less recovery time. This is where you get your time back, and it leaves you in better shape for everything else in your life. So when you're going off to do the things with your family, when you're sitting with your clients, as opposed to in the courtroom, you have more time, more energy, more ability to be there for them. You're more effective in your life, and you're happier, you're more at peace. So this is probably my favorite of these 3, even though it's the 3rd to get to, because it really took numbers 1 and 2 to get to a place where I could even see, much less start figuring out how to implement number 3.
Yeah, having that space. And a lot of times I feel like that kind of limiting belief that maybe underneath there, which is I can't say no because I need money. I need to work. And the funny thing is, and I'm sure this happened for you, as soon as you really made that shift and went after that thing that lit you up, the money comes, right? It'll follow your energy. And like you said, sometimes it's just the smallest things. And I always tell people, like, we all in a law firm, or if there's just 2 of you, generally it's a yin and a yang. You all give that person their strengths and what makes them happy. And if luckily, if you don't like it, great, give it to them, and vice versa, because just because you are a lawyer doesn't mean you do everything that comes with being a lawyer, every single task, because you're not going to be great at everything when it comes to being a lawyer. There's going to be stuff that are fantastic at, and it lights you up and you love it. And then that other stuff, it just burdens you and it takes a long time and it's draining, just like you said, getting all that stuff rearranged. But I think you made the best point, which is you got to have a little space to have that reflection to see, oh, that is not my jam or my jelly. How can I delegate that, or maybe just not do it?
And there's one thing that you said that kind of perked up my ear. Just because you're really good at something doesn't necessarily mean it's what you're meant to be doing forever, or what lights you up. So this was certainly true for me. I was really good at defending DV cases, and I was really good at criminal litigation. There were lots of aspects of it that really did light me up, but they were this pick and choose thing. And I felt like I had to, can I say shit? I felt like I had to slog through so much of it.
I think that I'm not sure where explicative that goes into. It's okay with me, but I don't.
Yeah. Here's what I'll just say it. Okay. I felt like I had to slog through so much shit to get to the pieces that were so uplifting and rewarding and validating. Even those pieces were few and far between for me, even though I was really good at it. And so ultimately that's what I realized when I had that space and that time to reflect. And that was for me one of the silver linings of the pandemic. It really did give me a lot more space a lot more time to reflect, even than I had already earned through these types of efforts in my work. And that's when I realized I am really good at this, but it's not what lights me up. It's not what I need to be doing long term. I'm grateful for the experiences, right? And they certainly they lead into what I'm doing now and contribute toward what I bring to the table. But I would hate for somebody to think I'm really good at this, so it must be what I meant to do. Not if it's not lighting you up. Not if it's not lighting you up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which makes me think of a book.
Which
we're
book?
Throwing books out there all the time.
Yeah, I love it.
Gay Hendricks, The Great Leap.
Okay, I have not read that one.
Oh yeah, he talks about being in the zone of genius, being in the zone of excellence, and you may need to drop off this thing that you do well to go to this like excellence level.
Absolutely.
He's got lots of stuff out there. That's the one that I've read. He has another one out that builds on that, but I haven't read that one yet. But yeah, it's not very long. It's pretty short, and it talks about limiting beliefs, but then like these zones. But it fits right in with what you just said.
Down. Yeah. I just, oh my gosh.
We'll have to put all these. Okay. So let me just tell everybody who's listening, we're going to make a list of all these books we've been talking about. We'll put them in the show notes for you.
Yeah,
for sure. We're coming down a little bit on time, but what I want to ask you, and so you can talk to everybody about what's your ideal client, your favorite client to help. And let's divide it up if you don't mind. Let's talk about coaching and then let's talk about special counsel.
Okay, so they're related, they're similar. So for special counsel, my ideal hiring attorney cares about his or her clients, about the quality of representation that they're providing. But the part that really makes us a good fit is they're pressed for time and they really want to focus on activities that are more lucrative, more impactful. And when I talk about this, it might or might not be business activities, right? If they want to work on their business, that's great. I can help them make the time. I can even point them in the right direction if they don't already have a direction. But it may be that they want to be able to go on vacation uninterrupted. Maybe that they want to spend more time with their family, that sort of thing. Basically, they know that there's a better way and they're looking for it and wanting to get some time back for themselves to, start doing things better or different or whatever it is. And they understand that leveraging my experience can help provide a path for improving whatever it is, their law practice, their business, their life in general. So that's there. When it comes to my coaching practice, it's similar, but there's a little bit more to it because we're talking about a bigger investment of time, energy, and money. And so this is somebody who's really ready for a change. They don't necessarily know what that change means, but they know that what you said earlier, what got them here isn't necessarily going to get them to the next level. And they are ready to do whatever they need to do in order to make that change. For me, I had to get to a certain pain point in my life and my business to really be ready to make that kind of investment of time, energy, and money. Like I said, I also had to, even within that journey, I had to get to a certain point with my business development of getting stuck. That place, I had already made a significant investment of all three of those things, time, energy, and money, and business coaching. But to get to the point where I was actually ready to try different things, new things that I didn't necessarily understand. So this is where some of the woo thing can come in. I had to get stuck in business. I had to get stuck 2 years in with this gargantuan problem of I've got this now thriving, successful law firm that is still feeling like it's riding on my shoulders and I have no relief, right? So the person who's a great fit for me in terms of coaching is probably most of what I said about the hiring attorneys, but also they're actually ready to try something new and different and understand that it may take a leap of faith. It may be something that they don't understand yet. So they're ready to venture into the unknown.
Gotcha. Sounds like what we're looking for, though, are definitely people who are ready for something new, different, open to different solutions, curious learners, right? Maybe,
Yeah, that's for sure for coaching. I'd say for hiring attorneys, not necessarily, because if they're interested in and want to go down the path of really transforming their practice, their business, their life, then yes, because that oftentimes is what it takes. But I'm not going to be pushing that on them. If what they're really looking for is just somebody to take some of the pressure off, take some things off their plate, I can do that too. It's all about consent. I'm not going to come in and say, we're going to completely transform everything here, because they may like where they are. That's not something I'm going to make a decision about.
Yeah. Just what we've been talking about in my mind and what you mentioned, like somebody wants better like work-life balance. You're definitely going to come in and implement a system that they've never heard or thought of. That's still going to take a little bit of, I know this is different, but just give it a second. Try it out for
Sure.
a little
Yeah.
bit, like not taking cold calls. Like sometimes I'll tell people like lawyers that and they're like, what? I'm like, that's
Yeah.
like,
And it's funny because I'm thinking about one particular attorney who is excited about the prospect of working with me. We just had a conversation a couple of days ago, and we're going to have our next conversation in a couple of days, an office visit. And he's one of those who is, I think he cannot even imagine scheduling calls the way that I do. And that's my point is I'm not going to push anything on him. I might suggest that he consider it, but that's it. And it's totally, he gets to be the creator in his life, right? He gets to decide what he wants to do and what he doesn't want to do, even if I know that would provide him with a lot of relief,
and
right? If it's
everybody
just,
else knows it's going to.
exactly. If it's something that he's just not comfortable contemplating at this point or forever, he gets to decide. And it's a little different. And that's what I mean, like the difference between somebody who wants to work with me as special counsel versus somebody who's actually ready to work with me as a coach. It takes a bit more. It takes a bit more faith. It takes a bit more, and I don't mean that in terms of religious faith that I'm going to help them. And if they're not at that place yet and they're not at that comfort level yet, then maybe what they really need to do is follow me on social media a bit, do a couple of my workshops and get a feel for who I am and what I'm like as a speaker and a coach before they take that leap.
Yeah. Are you doing any mastermind groups right now?
I have a group. It's more of a mentoring group. I originally tagged it as a mastermind group, but I actually recently decided I'm going to reframe that. And here's the deal. For folks who don't really want to make the level of investment, money, time, energy that private coaching requires, and I say requires because it's usually if you're investing at that level, then you want to make sure you're really ready to put a lot into it, I think. And that's my preference. I don't really want someone to step into one of my private coaching seats unless they are ready for that. For folks who want a lower level of investment, but still want to have access to me, that's what the group experience is about. And I basically set aside 3 times each month, basically a weekly Zoom call that we get together and they can ask any questions. I might provide a lesson. It's really what they need type of time. And there are also like a monthly call that's optional that they can have a private call with me. And that's the way I'm doing that right now. It's really just designed for the folks who, yeah, you know what, I am ready to work with you, but I'm not ready to work with you at that level. Or I'm just not, maybe I'm not now or may never be ready to invest at that level. It's just a way to offer something for folks who are earlier in their careers, may not have the resources or they're just so swamped. They're like, I just don't know if I can make use of.
I think it's a great way for people to put their toe in the water if they're ready to do something different, but you're just checking things out. Definitely support masterminds or mentor groups just so you can at least be in the same space as like-minded people, like someone trying to solve some issues.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, I have my own coach. I have my own mastermind group that I belong to.
Yeah. Same here. I always suggest it for anyone, no matter what they're doing. Listen, having that outside person be able to like look in and be like, whoa, like you grow in leaps and bounds compared to doing something, trying to do it on your own.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes people ask me like, okay, so when should I hire a coach? Why should I hire a coach? And who should I hire? These kinds of questions. When is when you feel like you need more. You're maybe wanting to either get where you want to go faster or you're stuck, you're at sea. I know something needs to change. I'm not sure what or how or whatever. These are great times to start looking into coaching and hiring a coach. The who, that's another great question. And it's it should be somebody who's accomplished the thing that you want to accomplish. And you might, like, how do you know that? You might know other people who know them. You might have, and this is a great one, they might have some opportunities, some ways to work with them that are a lower investment that you can start with. For me, that's my workshops, right? Available through UT Law, CLE, or follow me on social media and look for those times when I'm going to be speaking for the Austin Bar Association or the Capital Area Trial Lawyers Association or whatever. For one of my first coaches, he'd have these little trainings that were like audio recordings, and then it was followed by an event that was live in person, and you fly across the country and have a 2-day event. Do things like that to get a sense for them, because the key is this: does it resonate? Do you connect? Do you get a good feeling? Do you feel like they're going to help you? That's pretty much it. they've accomplished it and they click with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's most people you should be able to, like you said, follow them on social media, go check out their websites, check out their blogs. If they put a book out there, I always read the book. And that generally will tell me, like, do I want to invest more? Because the book's a pretty low investment doing something else. And I'm not going to say every coach has to have a book, because most of the ones that I've used don't, but they have enough material that, like you said, does that voice resonate or does it not? Because it does. It's not going to fit everybody.
Yeah. So. And you might be able to get on the phone with them. I do a discovery call. And one thing I will say is, if you are just trying to fill them out, just be honest, make that clear. Some people will I used to do these strategy sessions after my workshops. I've gotten to a place where I need to protect my time a little bit more. But, for somebody who's genuinely interested, I would say just reach out to the person and see what they have, what they can suggest, what they offer.
Yeah, exactly. Kiele, I really appreciate all of your time today. I know that folks listening hopefully learned a lot. If not, they're going to have lots of book suggestions.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the show notes, and also put a way for folks to connect with you directly. And again, like I said, I love following you on LinkedIn. Is that a good place to follow far as like social media?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a pretty good place to follow me. I also have a public profile on Facebook. It's Austin Kiele, and people sometimes think that's my first name. No, it's because I'm born and raised in Austin. I'm one of the unicorns.
Few.
So yeah, exactly. So Austin Kiele is my handle on Facebook for my public profile, as well as Instagram. Instagram isn't really developed yet. That's a to-do list item, but you can follow me there. And I do sometimes little video clips and little suggestions and whatnot. But my website is probably the best place if you want to. LinkedIn, just messaging me on LinkedIn is great. I love that. And then also you can get on my website and go to the contact page. And if you just drop me a note there, it shoots me an email.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much again. I appreciate you coming and talking to us what
you.
Special counsel means. And hopefully we can have you back on in the future. And
I would love that.
Keep trading book suggestions.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Appreciate that. If you liked the episode, please don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. And until next time, thank you.